estar con mi familia y disfrutar momentos felices con ellos.
To me, happiness is simply being with my family and being able to spend simple memories with them.
Cuando estuve detenido, siempre recordé momentos hermosos con mi familia, momentos de ir al parque, de ir al trampolín con mis hijos.
When I was detained, I remembered memories with my family, going to the park with them, going to the trampoline with my children.
Esos momentos me darán fuerzas y esperanza para seguir luchando.
Those moments will continue to give me hope to continue in this fight.
A toda la familia también que han sufrido separaciones y que viven constantemente por la amenaza de ser separadas, quiero decirle, aunque la injusticia nos está golpeando duro, no perdamos la fe.
To all the families who have been separated, or to all the families who have been threatened with family separation, this administration has hit us hard. But I want to tell you guys something.
Dios está con nosotros. Dios nunca nos dejará. Dios hace justicia a toda la injusticia que han hecho.
God is with us, and God will never leave us. God will bring justice to all of the injustice that we are suffering.
Nuestra comunidad nos respalda y al final se va a hacer justicia. El amor y la familia triunfará.
With our community by our side, and with our family by our side, love will trump.
Nunca pierdan la esperanza.
Never lose hope.
Volverán a ver a su familia.
You will once again see your family too.
Independientemente de lo que pase hoy,
Regardless of what happens here today,
con ICE, prométenme esto,
in my ICE checking, promise me this,
que seguirán luchando, orando, creyendo en la dignidad y la libertad, no solo para mí, para todos.
Promise me that you will continue to pray, continue to fight, resist, and love, not just for me, but for everybody. Continue to demand freedom. Thank you so much.
Okay, you're listening into that press conference there. That was Kilmar Abrego Garcia giving remarks live outside the ICE field office in Baltimore. As you heard, he gave thanks to his family, those in the crowd, church organizations, the CASA organization. This is one of the most closely watched immigration cases across the country.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our News Nation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.
We want to close up the Washington buildings, sell the buildings off, let somebody else get rich with the real estate, because it'll be a crime-free city. By the way, speaking of that, anybody murders something in the Capitol, capital punishment, capital punishment. If somebody kills somebody in the Capitol, Washington, D.C., we're going to be seeking the death penalty. And that's a very strong preventative.
President Trump there with severe penalties for anybody who commits murder in the nation's capital. The president also considering sending the National Guard to major cities, including Chicago, New York, and Boston, after cleaning up Washington, D.C. He's accusing D.C. officials of altering crime statistics, writing on Truth Social this: D.C. gave fake crime numbers in order to create a false illusion of safety. This is a very bad and dangerous thing to do, and they are under serious investigation for so doing. A new poll shows the majority of voters call President Trump's actions, quote, justified and necessary. Many also believe this show of force will make the area safer. Joining us right now is a man who knows, former NYPD inspector, Fox News contributor, Paul Morrow. Paul, great to have you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Your reaction to the president saying, look, death penalty, you kill, you get killed.
Well, he's well within his rights to do that. As he says, D.C. is under federal jurisdiction, and the feds have the ability to lever the death penalty where they have jurisdiction. It's not off the table federally. We saw that in the Luigi Mangione case, where there was a state indictment and there was a federal indictment, and the distinction was there were many people who wanted him to face the death penalty. So in Washington, D.C., that will apply. Other cities where Donald Trump is talking about exporting federal power to lock down some of the crime situations that we have there, he has fewer options.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me to see some of these heads of these blue cities and states say, we're not going to work with the president. What did Pritzker say the other day? President Trump, do not come to Chicago.
Yeah, what leader turns down resources? I mean, it's just such a no-brainer to work with the president here, because you can get assets here that are not necessarily going to impinge on your own ability to run your state and to look like, okay, I'm dropping the ball, so I need Donald Trump to bail me out. We've talked about it on the air. Things like the National Guard deployed to sensitive areas with just their omnipresence will tamp down conditions, will create order. The best thing you have in law enforcement is to stop things before they happen. You want that professional presence. When people see the uniform, it's a basic of broken windows policing. This would be an adjunct to that. You're going to see these guys, they're out there in uniform. You're going to behave, you're going to go someplace else. And so high crime areas where you have a lot of foot traffic, it's going to work. And just to close the loop on it, it happens now as a result of counterterrorism efforts that have been going on since 9/11 around New York City, in various transportation hubs, etc. You see these guys out there in fatigues with the long guns. Nobody blinks. It's just because in this case, it has the patina of Donald Trump.
And that's the thing. I mean, it's unbelievable that they could actually come out with a straight face and say, we're not going to work with ICE.
It is incredible. And you think about it, Paul, from a perspective of so many of these criminals, they get caught, and hours later, they're right back out on the street to do it again. So this enforcement is essential, and it's to Maria's point, it's mind-blowing that anyone wouldn't want resources coming in to help bring crime down, which citizens are asking for. You see it in interviews after interviews.
Yeah,
but what's the next step?
So before you answer that, let me just play this sound from Pritzker yesterday. Watch this.
Go talk to the people of Chicago who are enjoying a gorgeous afternoon in this city. Ask the families buying ice cream on the Riverwalk. Find a family who's enjoying today sitting on their front porch and ask if they want their neighborhoods turned into a war zone by a wannabe dictator. Mr. President, do not come to Chicago. There is not an emergency in the city of Chicago. There is nothing that calls for having troops on the streets of the city of Chicago. We have crime like other cities do. Chicago is in much better shape as a result of the work that we are doing to prevent crime, to interrupt crime, to reduce crime, that we do not want troops on the ground in the city of Chicago.
So, I mean, no emergency, Paul?
Look, in Chicago, it's a prime example. People voting with their feet, right? And this is right in your bailiwick. Look at the main businesses that have decamped from Chicago because of conditions there. You got Citadel, Boeing. There's talk now that one of the airlines is going to decamp from Chicago. Thousands and thousands of jobs are leaving because of the conditions on the ground. They can play with the numbers all they want. You can say, yeah, the crime is down, but compared to this year, it's not, etc. The real metric is, do people feel safe and do they want to be there? And very clearly they don't. And a performative stunt like walking around on the waterfront at 5:36 in the morning with a security detail, that doesn't really compel anybody. And remember something, Pritzker is vulnerable on this and he knows it. He wants to be president, but he took the wrong lessons from New York City's Criminal Reform Act, all of the stuff that they did in the criminal justice reforms, and he institutionalized it in his state as the Safety Act. Now, he was the first state to do that.
A lot of evidence that 2008-2009 financial crisis was caused by subprime loans, some of which were developed by these schemes of claiming you were residents in two houses to get a better mortgage deal. Now, she has not been charged yet, it is true, but she hasn't produced any evidence that what is being claimed about her is untrue. So where does all this stand legally? I mean, without a charge, can the president still fire her?
Well, good afternoon, David. He absolutely can. Look, Lisa Cook was credibly accused.
1,000 of those were using these fraudulent practices like the one she apparently did. And that really jumped right before the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So what she did and what others like her have done could really cause a financial crisis.
Oh, great point. And by the way, James, I think you convinced me. I was a little undecided about this, but you make a great prosecutor here. I think that you're right about some of the facts of this case. As you may recall, David, I was nominated to be on the Federal Reserve Board. So I've gone through this process, and it's like a proctology exam. I mean, you have to, all the financial disclosure, all the stuff. It's amazing to me, by the way, that somehow this got through. This was not discovered, when she was up for nomination. But I think you guys make a good point that if this were something that's unrelated to the job of being on the Federal Reserve Board, I'd say, well, let's wait to see what happens with her. But the fact that this is, as you just said, David, this is the kind of behavior that led to the financial crisis, that makes her not qualified for the job.
And the Federal Reserve says that. It's not us saying it. It was the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Philadelphia Federal Reserve, that actually spelled out how it could happen. Now, James, she's not going anywhere, according to the recent statement by the Federal Reserve. They said essentially, they didn't come out specifically and say this, but the full weight and support of the Federal Reserve was with her until the time there is some kind of court appearance or court order about what she did. So they're standing pat. That's a formidable object to go against, right?
It absolutely is. The question that the president needs to ask Jerome Powell right here, right now, is Lisa Cook allowed into the building? Does she have access to her email? Is she showing up to meetings where confidential information is shared about a range of issues, including and especially the type of mortgage fraud that she is credibly accused of having committed? Right here, right now, whatever you think about her, she deserves to be set aside, and this process can play out in the courts. Lisa Cook has a right to challenge anything. She will lose. This is a clear-cut case where she committed fraud. And here's the truth, David. It takes 776 days on average for the Department of Justice to go from charging someone in this type of fraud to actually getting a conviction. And so are we supposed to wait around for the next 2 years? That's 8 meetings a year, 16 meetings. She's supposed to lower interest rates, not raise interest rates, conduct monetary policy while she's been accused of this fraud. It's not President Trump's fault that she's a deceitful miscreant. She has to accept responsibility and do the right thing here, and that is let this process play out in the courts. And ultimately, she may have to hire a defense attorney. Forget being a plaintiff challenging the president. She's going to have to hire a defense attorney if the DOJ ends up prosecuting this.
Well, at the very least, she should come out with any evidence she may have that would go against the evidence that we have actually seen, which indicates she was saying essentially she was a resident in 2 different places at the same time, 2 different places in 2 different states, by the way. So we'll see how that plays out. Steve, the economic events that may happen if she does leave would mean that the president would have a majority stake in the voting population of the governors of the Fed, correct?
Yeah, something like that. Now, look, I still believe, David, that almost all of the power at the Federal Reserve Board really resides with the chairman. And so who it is going to be that's the chairman is really the critical thing. This raises the question, because this probably will be challenged in the courts, and it raises the question of whether the president has the authority to remove someone, whether it's a Federal Reserve Board governor or the chairman himself, from the Federal Reserve Board. I believe the president should have that authority. I'm not a lawyer, but my point is if people on the Federal Reserve Board aren't accountable to the president, then who are they accountable to? Nobody elected these people, so I think. But look. The Federal Reserve Chairman is the one who's going to make the decision about interest rates. I think the case is pretty strong now that those rates have to come down if we're going to have a very healthy economy in 2026.
James, isn't Powell more of a lame duck than ever, though, right now?
Yeah, I think Steve is right, David, that the chair really does run the Federal Reserve. You know that because at the July meeting, there were 2 dissents. And that just sounds okay, whatever, there were 2 dissents. That was the most dissenting votes we had gotten since 1993. That is just the latest piece of evidence, right, David? That this is not an organization where everyone gets a vote and then at the end of the day we tally them up. But Chair Powell is on his way out, and the facts show that rates should be a lot lower. Steve is right.
Steve. What were you going to say?
Just one quick thing on the way out. I think James is right, but I don't think there's ever been a time where the chairman has lost a vote. I may be wrong about that, but in other words, when the chairman says we're going to do X, there may be some dissents, but I don't think there's ever been a time where there's been a revolt on the Board of Governors.
Steve, I just want to switch to another topic for a second here. The Trump's ultimatum to the bureaucrats who have been targeting U.S. tech companies in terms of taxation and regulations, et cetera, while, by the way, we should mention, giving essentially a free ride to China's tech companies so they don't apply the same pressure to China that they're doing to the United States. The president is now saying he's going to turn on the tariffs again on Europe if they don't lay off of this kind of attack. What do you make of that?
These are totally discriminatory taxes. The only reason that Europe has these taxes is they're nowhere in the tech sphere, whereas the United States totally dominates, whether it's Apple or Amazon or Nvidia, all of these companies, Meta, and their only response to American dominance is try to impose these discriminatory taxes. Donald Trump, congratulations to Donald Trump for standing up for American companies. That's what he's doing.
Yeah, James, I got another one for you, which is a little different. You had an old suggestion back when Doge was in its heyday of giving a $5,000 check, a bonus, a Doge bonus to Americans. 79 million, I think, was the number that you were thinking of. Of course, Doge didn't get everything it should have gotten, a lot of people think, from Congress because, you know, there are a bunch of weak-kneed folks there. But what about a tariff dividend? We now have as much as $300 billion coming in from tariffs that we didn't expect to get. That would come out to about $1,900 per taxpayer, 158 million taxpayers. What about giving quarterly bonuses, tariff bonuses, to American taxpayers from that tariff revenue?
Well, it's an intriguing idea, David, and I'm happy that the president echoed support for it. But I think at the end of the day, what the president has done with the tariff policy is just extraordinary. We heard from Secretary Besson today in the cabinet meeting. We are pushing on $500 billion that we are looking at from this, and then close to $4 trillion over the next decade. And then the CBO, of course, threw in the towel, admitting they were wrong and they should have included the tariff revenue in the first place. Let me go to Steve's point for just a second on Europe. If Europe wants to tax and regulate their companies to death, they can. But don't you dare come for our companies in America and try to destroy them.
They're targeting U.S.
Right. And look, there's a reason why, David, we have Nvidia, Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Apple, etc. And then Europe has, well, let's see. They have Spotify. That's all they got over there. We have real companies, and President Trump is standing up for us.
One more. I'm going to try to squeeze in. They're going to kill me in the control room. But one more, Steve. You mentioned the possibility of a sovereign wealth fund. That is the stake that we're taking, that President's taking in Intel and with the Nippon Steel deal, et cetera. Could that blossom into a sovereign wealth fund, which you quote Barron's today? There's a guy, Bill Albert, in Barron's wrote, "This is a rotten idea on all fronts. Politicians and unelected bureaucrats are going to play investment banker? ? There's some incompetents who just invested tens of billions in California train to nowhere, built tens of thousands of windmills that barely produce electricity." He goes on. The government is a terrible investor because political influences don't make economic sense. Can't you talk President Trump out of this?
I wish I could. I would just simply say that, if the government is going to get into the game of picking industrial winners and losers, every time they've done it, guess what, David? They pick the losers.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to argue with it. We got to leave it at that, guys. Great stuff. Steve Moore, James Fishback, pleasure to see you both.
Joining me right now, the head of the U.S. Federal Housing FHFA Director and Fannie Mae Chairman, Bill Pulte. Bill, great to see you this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course. Always good to see you.
I want to get your take on all of the news and, of course, that criminal referral that you sent over Lisa Cook and others on mortgage fraud. But first, talk to us about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What is President Trump looking to do with these mortgage originators, enormous companies?
Well, the president did something great, if you recall, in his first term, and that is doing nothing. Everybody wanted to basically steal this company from the American taxpayers, and President Trump deserves great credit for saying, no, thank you. We are going to do what's in the best interest of people. Maria, he got approached, rather, to sell these companies for about $100 billion, if you can believe that, $150 billion. Today, that value is worth anywhere between $500 and $700 billion. I think it's going to $1 trillion and potentially even higher. So President Trump has exercised great judgment, and he'll exercise, in my view, that same judgment in deciding whether or not to do something with regard to Fannie and Freddie.
Well, this is a big story. A lot of our viewers want to know about it. Investors love these companies because they're incredibly important. What are we talking about? $7 trillion in assets between the two companies' balance sheets?
Yeah, $7.8 trillion, and it's going higher, and frankly, it's going to continue to go higher. These are, in my view, in terms of assets, the biggest companies in the world, these two biggest companies. And no other president, until President Trump showed up on the scene, even knew that they existed. Biden didn't really know anything existed. He certainly didn't know Fannie and Freddie existed. We came in, there were 16,000 people working from home. We ordered them all back to work. We're getting the earnings going. Money's pouring in like never before. And it's all because President Trump is making this a priority.
And has the president decided on the lead banker to take these companies public once again? Is it going to be a $30 billion IPO?
He has not made any decisions. That will be on his own time, in his own way, in his own form. And I would defer to the president on what or if he wants to do anything here. This is entirely up to him. He has the best instincts, frankly, of anybody I've ever met. And I've met a lot of really successful people. So I'm going to rely on his instincts. If he says go, we'll go. But that's entirely up to the president.
When would a deal be happening? Later this year?
We'll see. Again, that's entirely up to the president. I think we have a bunch of different options. I would say this. The demand for this product, the demand for this deal is so significant. The president has had, and we have had, banks calling us. They're still calling us. I mean, you could have all of the banks in the world want this deal. So we'll see what happens, but it's got to be done if it's done on the president's terms, and I'm very confident it will be. And frankly, I think it's going to be oversubscribed.
Yeah, and I know that executives from Bank of America and Citi and JP Morgan have been in the Oval Office trying to get this business. But I want to talk about the scandals that we're talking about as well today, because we are now looking at 10 years of scandals against President Trump. We're going to get to Lisa Cook and potential mortgage fraud in a moment, but it started with Russia collusion, went into impeachments, indictments, even January 6th, according to Ed Martin at the DOJ. And here's what Ed Martin told me yesterday. Got to get your take on this. Watch.
And there's a group of us working on January 6th. What we've learned is that the federal government, the Department of Justice, but other aspects, targeted these citizens. They basically turned government on to make the hoax work. So I'm not talking about somebody that pushes a cop. That's a charge you can look at and charge. I'm talking about that the FBI and others were putting American citizens on terrorism watch lists. They were auditing their IRS tax returns. They were targeting the American people. They were taking massive amounts of resources and moving them from fighting, child trafficking and fighting real corruption and saying we have to move everybody to look at the Capitol siege. It was a political hoax that was driven by Garland, Lisa Monaco, and others. There's a guy named Robert Jackson, who is the prosecutor guy. And what you see is Lisa Monaco's Justice Department acting in ways we've never seen before. And when we show all that, and we're writing reports regularly on it, it's not one aspect. The federal court system was
was used in a way. The jails were used in a way to punish people. It's foreign. They didn't do this to the terrorists after 9/11, and they were doing it to American citizens.
What about the January 6th committee? Did they destroy evidence? Is there criminality there?
Of course, we're all in that too. And trust me, a lot of people did not get a pardon that were involved in the select committee, and they ought to be keeping an eye on their mailbox, because there's a lot to be asked about.
I mean, Director, what they did here was put people who were going and, peacefully protesting against the election on no-fly lists. And the DOJ did nothing about it. It feels like you finally have some resources in the DOJ. You've sent several criminal referrals. All the while, we actually may have witnessed mortgage fraud. Tell me about the criminal referral that you sent to the DOJ over Lisa Cook. What did she do specifically, Bill?
Well, Lisa Cook has big problems. They're going to continue to get bigger. Her statements that she made last night, I think, only make her situation worse. It's very odd to see people try to twist backways, sideways, and upside down to justify mortgage fraud. This is a very serious crime, mortgage fraud. It carries up to 30-year prison sentences. I believe the president has ample cause to fire Lisa Cook. Whether he wants to do that or not is entirely up to the president. However, we will go where mortgage fraud is. If mortgage fraud is with a Republican or a Democrat, it doesn't matter. If you commit mortgage fraud in President Trump's America, we're going to come after you. And Lisa Cook is no exception to that. I've also been very surprised, Maria, I would say, with the lack of response and the mismanagement, the continued mismanagement by Jay Powell throughout all of this. You would think when there's an alleged crime that somebody would be able to handle things properly. But unfortunately, I think Jay Powell's actually walking himself into this whole situation. He used the federal spokespeople last night, the Federal Reserve spokespeople, to circulate her statement. I don't know why anyone would support somebody having and declaring on a mortgage contract that they have two primary residences. That is fraud, and we are going to prosecute it, and I hope that the DOJ will take it very seriously.
So according to mortgage documents, you write to the DOJ, to Pam Bondi, that Lisa Cook falsified bank documents and property records to acquire more favorable loan terms?
Well, of course, you can't declare that in her case, she had a home in Michigan, and then 2 weeks later, she gets a loan in Michigan for her home. She declares it as her primary principal residence, and then literally 2 weeks later, she goes to an Atlanta condo, buys an Atlanta condo, secures a loan, and also declares that as her primary residence. We all know primary or principal, that means one. That means the lead dog. That means what house are you living in? And in this case, we have a Federal Reserve governor who's in charge of setting interest rates, running this entire economy, right hand to Jerome Powell, committing, in my view, mortgage fraud. This can't happen. I think it gives the president enormous cause to fire her. I think she will resign. Frankly, I think she's very stupid if she doesn't resign.
Well, President Trump posted on Truth Social, Lisa Cook should resign. Bill, of course, this is on the heels of your criminal referral. You listed in that referral how she listed two different homes as her primary residence in a 2-week period. You also sent criminal referrals over others. Now, Cook responded. She says, I have no intention of being bullied to step down. I am gathering accurate information to answer any legitimate questions, Bill. Is that the statement you're referring to, saying that that's not adequate?
Well, not only is that not accurate, I mean, first of all, intention of being bullied. The question for Ms. Cook is very simple. Did you sign these mortgage documents? Of course she did. And then on top of that, did she also declare primary residency in both Michigan and Atlanta? The answer is yes. So, she can play this all she wants, but, people are smart. And I'll tell you this right now. This is like the most viral story in the country right now. People are sick and tired of one rule for certain people and another rule for other people. And it's got to stop, and I think it's going to stop with the Federal Reserve governor. And frankly, I would be surprised if she's not suspended by the Federal Reserve this week. I mean, why are they going into Jackson Hole talking about this nonsense? This is supposed to be the biggest week for the economy. And here we've got this circus clown running around saying that she's being bullied when really she was committing mortgage fraud.
Well, I mean, you also sent criminal referrals to others. Do you have grand juries in place for this, for Lisa Cook, for Adam Schiff?
Well, we send criminal referrals all the time. That's what's funny about this is people are saying, oh, well, you know, this is selective. No, it's not. When we get mortgage fraud, we are going to prosecute it. And we are not prosecutors. So what we are going to do is we are going to refer that to the DOJ. You know, Maria, I refer people almost every day to the Department of Justice for mortgage fraud. Why should Lisa Cook be exempt from that? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And whether it's Adam Schiff or Letitia James or, frankly, any other Republican, if you commit mortgage fraud, there should be consequences. You know, this risks the rule of law. This risks the integrity of the institution that we have. This risks the safety and soundness of the mortgage bond market. We can't have that. We either have to have a safe and sound bond market that everybody agrees to certain rules, or we have to have this mayhem where a Federal Reserve governor can say that she's outside of the law. No one is above the law.
Well, and you know, what Ed Martin said from the DOJ over the weekend when I spoke with him is that when you get a criminal referral, it opens the door to actually investigate what is going on here. And he said when you're lying about one thing, you're often lying about something else. When you're committing a crime here, you might be committing a crime there. So it opens up a bit of a Pandora's box.
Well, Maria, I'll tell you something that we haven't really discussed publicly, and that is we're also probing her Massachusetts property. You know, these are things where you get a tip in, and then all of a sudden you learn that they have another loan here, another loan there. And it's concerning because, as you know, I oversee not just Fannie and Freddie, but I also oversee the Federal Reserve home loan banks. And one of the banks that's involved in this investigation, unfortunately, is a member bank of the Federal Home Loan Banks. I am the regulator. President Trump, under President Trump's leadership, I am the regulator. So I have a duty to do this. When I got Senate confirmed, I swore in my testimony that I would oversee mortgage fraud. So we're going to go wherever the facts are. We're going to turn that over to the DOJ. And if they decide to impanel a grand jury on this, which I believe that they will, I believe that the DOJ will open up an investigation in this. I think it's just a stain on the Fed. And I think it's very disrespectful both to the country, to the president, and frankly, even to the Federal Reserve for this lady to stay in office.
Well, look, grand juries, what is this going to take, 18 months or something? I mean, when you get a criminal referral, this could go on now for a year. No?
No, I mean, you can move very quick. I mean, look, this is a black and white situation from my perspective. It's either did she sign these documents or not. You know, what's funny is they tried to go after President Trump on, you know, complete nonsense. He was totally innocent. In this case, you see these signatures. Did you sign this document or did you not? And, you know, she can say whatever she wants, but at the end of the day, the facts speak for themselves. And I'll tell you, this is the hottest story in the world right now, Maria, for the very reason that people get it. You can't go and fraudulently represent things that aren't true in order to procure a loan. And the elites and the wealthy class, this is why President Trump won in a landslide, because the people are sick and tired of this crap.
Yeah. But putting mortgage fraud aside, I mean, President Trump has issues with just the ineptitude of the Fed. The president has accused Chairman Jay Powell of hurting the housing industry. He said this on Truth Social. Could somebody please inform Jerome Too Late Powell that he is hurting the housing industry very badly? People can't get a mortgage because of him. There is no inflation, and every sign is pointing to a major rate cut. Bill, if we were to see a rate cut next month, the president will obviously, you know, be able to say, look, I told you so. But are we talking about a bloated situation regardless of whether we're getting cuts at all? They put all that money into the new headquarters. I was told, I mean, I'm about to interview Christine Lagarde at the European Central Bank, and I'd like to know how different the ECB is to the Fed. I mean, the Fed has how many branches? How many offices? How much money spent?
Well, it's crazy. But first, I want to just distinguish, Maria. First, I just want to distinguish, Maria, if this is okay. I want to put the regulator hat and the other hat aside for a second with regard to Lisa Cook, because obviously those are alleged crimes. So let's shift into the political side of things. I think those are very important to keep different. As it relates to the political side of things and as it relates to policy, which is what you're talking about in terms of interest rates, he has gotten this so wrong that I'm very concerned with the damage that it's doing to the housing market. And I think it will do damage to the housing market for up to 2 years after he's gone. So time is of the essence with regard to cutting these rates. We've already seen home builders laying off people. We've seen home builders restrict supply. This may be in the best interest of home builders, but it's not in the best interest of Americans. The interest rates need to be at 1%. And frankly, I hope that whoever becomes Fed chair takes them down to 1%, if not lower. We have a president who's extremely competent. The president is unlike Biden. Biden didn't even know what inflation was. This president came in and crushed inflation. So you have a president that will continue to crush inflation. He will continue to keep inflation low. Rates need to be at 0 or 1% at the highest.
Yeah, well, you don't see a lot of that in the mainstream media, that's for sure. They completely missed the point when Joe Biden sent inflation to 40-year highs, 9.1%. We're all the way back down to 2% under President Trump. Bill, we're going to be watching your work. Obviously, a huge story. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you, sir. President Trump taking aim at Fed Governor Lisa Cook yesterday after Bill Pulte, the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, accused Cook of submitting fraudulent information on 2 mortgage applications. You know, you can't have 2 primary residences. The Justice Department getting involved. Cook responding by telling FBN she, quote, has no intention of being bullied to step down from my position because some questions raised in a tweet.
Is this a tweet?
Well, Charles, interject. The only way for Trump to fire a governor is for cause. And Bill Pulte, head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, thinks President Trump has got the